Hello, BookTube. I went to the Brattle Bookshop very, very early this morning. I had a batch of errands that I had to do, and I wanted to get them done very early in the morning before the worst of the day's heat and humidity set in. Just the exact kind of calculations that you expect to make in the first week of October in New England. So I ended up at the Brattle Bookshop fairly early, but not early enough to avoid the seedy, hungover, late-night traffic from people on the sidewalk. I was stopped by a couple of men who weren't drunk, but they hadn't been sober for long, who asked me where a certain bus stop was. And I said, you go 3 streets up and then take a left. It's 3 streets up, and then you take a left. That's where the bus stop is that you're looking for. And they said, oh, okay, all right, so 3 streets up and to the left, great. And then the taller of the two men said, so it's not this left right here. It's 3 streets up and to the left. I said, yeah, it's 3 streets up and to the left. And he said, so it's not this street and it's not the next one. I said, I'm not going to help you count to 3. And I walked away from them, and they were just... And I don't know if they're ever going to reach their destination. If they can't handle 1, 2, 3, then they can't handle bus fare. But that was the only impediment. And then lickety-split, I was at the Brattle Bookshop, which for those of you who are new to this channel is a used bookstore in Boston that has a huge outdoor sale lot. Thousands and thousands of books for $1, $3, and $5. And not junk. Tons of stuff that you're going to want. It's very easy to spend $20 out in the sale lot. Whether it's on 4 books or on 20 books. It's very easy to do. And I had a ball. A low-key ball. That shopping, browsing those books, talking to all of those old friends of mine, the books themselves, not the staff members, has saved me in so many different occasions. It's made me feel wonderful. And so it feels just wonderful to do, even if I'm alone. And I got a ton of books. I've said before with the Brattle that the thing that really stops you is how much you can carry, not money. And I reached the limit of how much I could carry in my shoulder bag and in a tote bag. And once I'd reached that limit, I just had to stop no matter what. So I reached that limit, and then I lugged everything back here. So you would expect that in this video I'm going to show you a gigantic pile of books, but no, no, that won't be true. Not this time around. Because when I shop at the Brattle, I have all of you in mind. I have hundreds of people in mind, dozens of people close at the front of my mind, dozens of people whose reading tastes I know, and the lacunae in whose libraries I tend to know. So I'm not shopping for myself at all alone. I'm shopping for a whole bunch of people and myself, and I got very lucky today in today's Brattle visit. But most of the luck, 3/4 of it, was luck for other people. I'm not going to show that on this channel in case the recipients are watching. Instead, I'm going to prepare those, clean them up, and put them in the mail. But I did find some books for myself. It's not a big pile at all, but it'll do. No Brattle. There's no law that says a Brattle book haul has to be 2 hours long. In this particular case, I'm overjoyed at the reason why it isn't long. The reason why it isn't long is because most of the books I found were for other people that I think are going to please them quite a bit. But the ones I found pleased me, including the find of the day. There's always a find of the day. There's always something that you're not only happy that you found, but that you can't believe you found. And for me, I recently was shifting around my mass market paperbacks. I'm forever trying to figure out what to do with my mass market paperbacks. A lot of them getting kind of old. They're not as durable as I would like. Most of the books in this room are hardcovers, except for the whole bookcase of romances. Most of the books that I have are trade paperbacks or hardcovers just because I'm kind of hard on my stuff. Mass markets tend not to live very long. But I have a core collection of about, I'd say, 200 mass markets that I don't want to get rid of. But where do they go? Where do they go? It feels absolutely wasteful to stack mass market paperbacks on a shelf, spine out, just one deep, so that you can look at the shelf and see them all, because they take up so much space. So it's natural when you have mass markets to want to double or even triple stack them, but then you're not seeing a lot of the books that you have. And a book that's unseen won't randomly tempt you when your eyes are looking over the shelves. I don't know what to do with my mass markets. I will figure it out. But I was moving them yet again. I was shifting them yet again, and I found one that I have read a few times. It's an older, what is this? A Mentor mass market that's falling apart. I was ready to say goodbye to it. It's this. The Wonderful World of Books. A wonderful compendium of bookish essays, bookish lists, all kinds of things like the how to find time to read, reading among friends, the pleasures of reading, all kinds of things like that. Wonderful thing from probably, I want to say 1945, 1952. I took this thing down, and I found when I was shifting the mass markets, I remembered how much I have read this over the years, how much I've loved it over the years. And this, you can't really tell on this video, but this is creaking. This is starting to show its age. It's starting to show that it's not going to live much longer. And I was mourning that because I don't want to get rid of this. I really love it. And I was thinking, well, okay, but what are the chances? I always say the Brattle will provide, that if I wait long enough, I'll find something else at the Brattle. But what are the chances I was going to find another copy of that paperback that was probably on a spinner rack at a train station somewhere in Scarsborough or whatever? Well, I thought, when am I ever going to find another copy of that mass market paperback? And I didn't find one today. Instead, today I found the hardcover. I had no idea this existed as a hardcover. Now, I got it with its... This was $3, and this is why, because that is all that's left of the front cover. There's the back cover, and there's the the flap of the front cover, but there's nothing left, virtually nothing left of the title on the cover. It's just destroyed. And that's okay. That's perfectly okay. That means that I will use this as a naked hardcover. The naked hardcover is 100 times more durable than my little paperback, and I'll decorate the naked hardcover with whatever I can salvage of the back cover and the flaps. I found this. Can you believe it? The Wonderful World of Books. I found it as a hardcover. I didn't even know it was a hardcover. So that was the find of the day, and that was tremendous, and it's going to continue. I've been rereading stuff in this book and chasing down the authors. A lot of the authors are long forgotten but once popular book critics, my own profession. Chasing them down, see if they have any other books, see if there was ever any collection of maybe writings about them or what happened to them. The adventures in this book have just been wonderful, and it is fantastic to know that those adventures are now continued indefinitely. This thing will last me the rest of my life. Then this next one that I found, also in my profession, is a rebuy. When the Brattle is so cheap, $1 a piece, that you can easily do that. I have this. I think I hauled it on this channel. You might have seen it. You might remember it. But this one, as soon as I saw it, I realized it had a lot of the gold gilt inlaid of the embossed covers and spine that were totally missing from the copy that's in the bookcase on Books About Books. So I just grabbed it. I love this volume. Absolutely love it. This is Notes and Reviews. And this is a collection of the very earliest review work that Henry James did for the North American Review and also for The Nation. When he was in the 1860s, when he was a young man. He was just making his literary debut in the world. Like everybody else, his literary debut was not an extremely polished, promising novel. Instead, it was a whole slew of book reviews, quite a few of which he did anonymously. Can you imagine someone having the gall to write anonymous book reviews, let alone one every day? What kind of a loser would you have to be to do that? But these are collected here. A lot of these early reviews are collected here. Authors that, let's see here, that will be either remembered or not. There's a review of Wives and Daughters by Mrs. Gaskell. But there's also a review of A Noble Life by the author of John Halifax, Gentleman, which I've seen at the Brattle, but it's gone as gone can be. A review of Can You Forgive Her by Anthony Trollope. These are wonderful. I read the volume that I have out on that bookcase. But I'm very happy to have this in a better format. This will take a read. It's nice to have two copies anyway of this thing. I had to read. There's an introduction by a literary poobah in Boston who writes, "I may be permitted to waive the point and aver merely to the common agreement that his work was endowed with a distinction and personal charm which, to ears attuned to his particular appeal, will always be unrivaled. He was decidedly what he himself would have called a special case. Even his youthful journalistic work will at once strike his accustomed reader as redolent of his personal note. It was not pot-boiling, as he was never quite under the economic necessity which resorts to that, and this being so, it could not be, with his temperament, either hasty or slovenly, however impenetrably, anonymous." This is the author not only extolling Henry James, but trying his best to imitate Henry James. And don't you believe for a minute that note about how Henry James was disinterested in the money he got for these reviews. Absolute nonsense. He needed pocket money just as badly as any other 20-something man did, and he got it by book reviewing. Probably he, later in life, would have said, well, set these early reviews aside, and I shall enlarge upon them, as befits my fame and stature, but don't reprint them as they are. Critics tend to do that. They have an elevated sense of their own literary importance. And so, and as a result, we don't get the early book reviews, unsigned or signed, that some great literary titans did for the first 10 years of their career, and kept right on doing through their career. There's almost never an example of a critic, of a writer, who once they ascend to the peak of Mount Helicon and write boring novels, stops writing book reviews. There's almost never an example of that. Don't you believe it if somebody says that that is true. Especially if an author says, well, you know, now that I've got the royalties coming in and the house in Monaco and the Dick Cavett show appearances, I really don't know. One doesn't have time to write book reviews. Don't you believe it? Gore Vidal was doing it until the week he died. Robert Graves made a mint off I, Claudius. Kept doing book reviews until the day he died. Authors remember that they were poor. And that book reviewing is a way to stave that off. Book reviewing is a way to get an electric bill paid with congenial work that is fairly low impact. So they never stopped doing it. And Henry James didn't. And that bit about him not needing the money when he was a young man dodging service in the Civil War, no, I don't think so. And then this next one, another classic example of something that you're more likely to find at the Brattle than at a normal bookstore. This is from 1915. This is The Song of the Cardinal by Gene Stratton Porter. Doesn't have a dust jacket, but it does have this lovely. The books of the time used to guard the artwork with onion skin, a little piece of onion skin there, and then you get the title of the book, The Song of the Cardinal. This is full of illustrations, not just. Nice swampy place. Cardinals love that sort of thing. Not just cardinals, but also their terrain and also touched up photographs. And this is technically a novel. it's technically a novel, but it's mainly a lightly novelized natural history of what cardinals are like. And this was, I believe, the very first book that this author wrote under her own name. Way back when. And it did really well. People loved it. Readers loved it. Even critics loved it. And she kept going. Gene Stratton Porter has never had a major literary biography in anything like the modern era. She may have had one around the time when she was at the peak of her fame, but people have completely forgotten her now. And that's a shame, because her story was fascinating. She was an Indiana writer who married a wealthy man, and her husband had a gift for generating wealth, so he multiplied his wealth 10 times over while they were married. But she kind of wanted to make money of her own, and she wanted to do it by writing, and did. Wrote for McCall's and Ladies' Home Journal and a whole bunch of other things, and then started writing books. And The Song of the Cardinal did well. I think this was her acknowledged debut, although I'm pretty sure she wrote at least one other book before this, not under her own name, maybe not under any name. But then she started writing full-blown novels. This is sort of a natural history dressed in a novel. But then she started writing full-blown novels, romances, and struck it rich. Almost as rich as her husband. What fascinating family correspondence there must be that no biographer has ever found, that no biographer has ever used. I'm sure they're in boxes somewhere in Indiana. Her books made her wealthy, including, most of all, a book called A Girl of the Limberlost, which is Once Upon a Time. I think it came out in 1910, so about 100 years ago. And 100 years ago, if you had asked, if you had said, walked into a bookstore or even a literary gathering and said, Girl of the Limberlost, I've never heard of it, no one would believe it. Everyone in the room would have thought, even if they poo-pooed the book, they would have thought, you must be the biggest literary ignoramus in the world not to know the most popular book in the country. And it's gone. Completely gone. And so are The Harvesters, I think, was another one of hers that was pretty effective, had some pretty dark moments. The Limberlost was a real place. It was a sprawling, very beautiful, wild swampland in Indiana that Gene Stratton fell in love with. She knew every inch of it. She knew its rhythms. She knew all of its wild animals, and she loved it. She fell in love with it, and it's gone. It was drained for improvement in much the same way that a lot of the Everglades were destroyed in the name of agricultural improvement. So the Limberlost is gone, but it lives in her book. I would, if whoever sold this to the Brattle actually had a copy of The Girl of the Limberlost, especially a nice copy with illustrations, I'd grab it in a heartbeat, even though it's a little bit on the tedious side. It made a whomping snot load of money for her, in addition to everything else. It was a sweet book, but it made a huge amount of money. It sold millions of copies at a time when only a handful of books, less than half a dozen books, did that. And so did all of her other books. Most of her other books also were rampant bestsellers. It made her a huge amount of money. She was a fascinating figure. She was very much involved in conservation, naturally, as you'd expect. If you read Girl of the Limberlost, you're going to think this is someone who wouldn't want natural worlds to be destroyed. I don't think I've ever read this book. I've read Girl of the Limberlost a few times, and I've read all of her other novels. Technically, I guess this is a novel too. I'm not really going to read it that way. We're going to read it more as her observations of cardinals in the wild, because she was a big writer about natural history, a big writer of nature books. Wonderful to find, though, and like I said, a classic illustration of how weird and strange and wonderful the Brattle sale lot can be. You never know what you're going to find out there. Could be something brand new. Obama's book was out there today, for instance. Could be a huge picture book that was $70 when it first came out. Now it's $1. Could be an old mass market paperback. I have to resist the allure of those because they don't live. They don't hold up for me. Or it could be something like this, Song of the Cardinal, that a used bookstore that doesn't get the kind of turnover that the Brattle does, maybe someplace in Indiana, wouldn't have any idea what to do getting a book like this. Should we mark it up? Should we sell it online? I don't know that their customers ever see it. Their customers certainly wouldn't see it in a barrow of $1 books. This next one is fairly newish. Let me check the date on this. Yeah, 2013. So before we were talking with each other, but I did get an advance copy of this, and I did get a finished copy, and I did read it, and I really liked it. But it's one of those books where I liked it, but it's also dug in my mind to make me wish to read it again. I got rid of it, and I checked. This is not my copy, but I found a copy, a hardcover copy, at the Brattle. This is by Brian Moynihan, and it is Leningrad, Siege and Symphony, from Atlantic Monthly Press, I think. Yes. And this is the story of the Siege of Leningrad. It's the story of the long heyday of Leningrad before its barbaric name, when it was St. Petersburg. It's the story. St. Petersburg was an amazing location full of art and museums and shops and beauty and parks and fountains and bookstores and intellects, artists of all kinds. An amazing place. And then it was brutalized, and it became Leningrad, and then it was sacked by the Nazis, and then its intelligentsia were the very people who were responsible for that vibrant art scene were constantly being pogromed, repressed, and blacklisted by Stalin. And one of the figures who had to dance that very uncomfortable dance with Stalin, who was a monster, one of the worst monsters in human history, was Dmitri Shostakovich, who was a composer and a nationally regarded one that even Stalin he was not able to understand it, but he did have enough human intelligence left in his being was largely composed of homicidal rage. But every once in a while there were still little glimmers of the human being that he last was when he was 4. He wasn't human after that. But there were little glimmers of it that you couldn't really get rid of, and certain people in his orbit were able to impress upon those little glimmers of the human Stalin that Shostakovich has a gigantic reputation outside the Soviet Union, that he's regarded as one of the greatest composers in the world, and he lives here. So just because you don't think anything of his work doesn't mean... Shostakovich had his horrible run-ins with Stalin and with the state apparatus, and also with the deprivations of Russia at the time. And he wrote, among many other things, he wrote his Great Seventh Symphony, the Leningrad Symphony, that the story of its performance, of its premiere in Leningrad, where most of the orchestra had been killed, and the orchestra members who were left were so enfeebled and enervated by thirst and hunger and disease that they were worried they'd let the side down. They were worried that if they got up on the stage for the first time in years, they wouldn't do the work justice. a call had to go out to just general people who have any kind of musical training to fill out the symphony, and it's a grueling work. It's I want to say it's Shostakovich's longest work, his longest symphony. It's a pretty long symphony. It's kind of weird. I don't know how often you get a chance to listen to it in the 21st century. I'm not sure that, like, for instance, the music director at your local symphony would ever put it on the program. I've heard it a couple of times, including once in St. Petersburg, and it's a weird piece. It doesn't have the driving force of some of Shostakovich's other work that is shorter. It seems to me to be distracted, even though all the anecdotes about Shostakovich composing it all say that he could not be distracted, no matter what. That there were children screaming, there were dogs yapping, there were the constant threat of that stern pounding on the door, and he just kept going, walking around the grounds, walking around the garden, composing the score in his head, and then sitting down and just writing it at breakneck speed, passage after passage, section after section. I love those anecdotes, but I'm not sure that the symphony doesn't sound distracted. I think it does, just a little. But it's an amazing thing. I'm very glad to have this book. I will gladly reread it, and I will gladly re-listen to the symphony. I'll do that tonight. I'm sure there's an ad-free version on YouTube somewhere. And then the final book. See, we only have 5 books this time around. Because most of my time, most of my effort was devoted to finding books for other people, and oh boy, did I find some. The last one that we'll do is Brets. And those of you who followed along on our Brideshead Revisited read-along just recently will remember the mention of Brets. Brets is has for a long time made a kind of Burke's peerage, a guide to the peerage of Great Britain. Who the houses are, who the members are, who their grandparents were, what their properties are, that sort of thing. It's kind of funny. It's used as a barometer of snobbery, how much you care about Brets and your mention in Brets. It's Sebastian Flight who mentions to Charles Ryder that his whole family is all over the Brets. But I found today a Brets Guide to the Stately Homes of England. A lot of you will know, if you watch this channel, I have a huge sweet tooth for English country homes, including the more palatial ones. This is all the palatial ones, and probably none of the ones, yeah, that's Roshan Park, none of the ones that aren't stately. This is probably all going to be stately, but it doesn't matter to me. It's full of full-color artwork. It's full of, oh, look at that. Oh, look at that. Oh. But this also has period photographs of what things used to look like. And there is a vagabond you would invite? Look at that. Fantastic. I will gladly read through this thing. It won't be all the stately homes of England. And of course, some of you, I don't know, maybe not any of you, or one or two of you will immediately, you'll hear the term stately homes of England and you'll immediately think of Quentin Crisp. And I agree. That line is absolutely indelible. I won't say it on this channel, just in case I offend a snowflake. But you can't hear the phrase stately homes of England without thinking of that particular... Oh, I can't anyway. But I have a whole shelf now, or a whole shelf worth. They're not all together, and I should gather them together. But I have a whole shelf's worth of books on great English piles, great English country homes of one kind or other, from castles to things that are more homely. Always thinking to set a major work of fiction there for NaNoWriMo. I don't think it'll happen this time around, because I'm pretty concentrated on NaNoWriMo being science fiction this year. But you never know. NaNoWriMo is not the only time when you get to write fiction. So that's going to be our Brattle pyramid. It's going to be very easy. The Brets, Stately Homes of England. How can we get rid of the glare here? There we go. Then Leningrad, The Siege and the Symphony, a study of the degradations of the city under a hugely long siege, and also the story of the composition of the famous symphony. Then The Song of the Cardinal, by the author of Girl of the Limberlost. We have notes and reviews by a young Henry James, when it hadn't quite crossed his mind to write like God, or to think he was one. And finally, fantastically, The Wonderful World of Books in a hardcover. Good Lord. So that's 3 hardcovers with no dust jackets. But I'm not a purist about such things. I'll gladly take it, especially if they're fun to read. I'm going to be reading stuff in these all day, in between other things. So anyway, it looks like the sun is subsuming me. And that makes it very hot. It is boiling hot in Boston today. So I'm going to wrap this up. But I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.